Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
Alara and I met in a way that felt scripted. One of those chance encounters in a crowded coffee shop that screenwriters dream up. I was a young financial analyst then, hungry for advancement, my world a grid of spreadsheets and market projections. She was an architect, a woman who saw the world in lines, angles, and possibilities. There was a confidence in her stride, a charisma in her smile, and a mysterious look in her deep hazel eyes that always seemed to conceal more than it revealed. From that first conversation over spilled lattes and shared napkins, I was utterly captivated. She was different from any woman I had ever known, more intense, more experienced, more fundamentally sure of herself in a way that was both intimidating and irresistible. I loved that about her. During the months we dated, she spoke of her past in vague, painterly strokes: a childhood in a small town, a university on the coast, a previous engagement that had ended amicably years ago. She'd mentioned these things casually, as though they were merely footnotes in the grand novel of her life, nothing significant enough to dwell on. Being in love, deeply and completely, I never pushed for details. The past was the past, I told myself. What mattered was the future we were building together. The wedding came quickly, propelled by a connection that felt as strong and certain as gravity. Our first 2 years of marriage were idyllic. We built a comfortable home in a quiet suburb, a sanctuary filled with the scent of her favorite jasmine candles and the sound of my classic rock records. Weekends were for candlelit dinners, spontaneous road trips that broke the routine, and long, lazy Sunday mornings tangled in bedsheets. I felt like I had not only found the perfect partner but had won some cosmic lottery I didn't even know I was playing. Then came the proposal that would change everything. It wasn't a proposal of marriage, but of career, a transfer, and a significant promotion. My company wanted me to lead a new team at their branch in Northwood, a charming, sleepy town nestled in a valley upstate. It was a huge step for my career, an opportunity for real growth. For Alara, it was a return to her roots. Northwood was her hometown. "It's perfect, Liam," she said, her eyes shining with an excitement that mirrored my own. "It's a sign." At first, her enthusiasm swept me along. For me, it was a new professional landscape to conquer. For her, it was a homecoming. She spoke of the crisp autumn air, the familiar storefronts, the comfort of being near places that held her memories. I saw only the positives: a better job, a slower pace of life, a chance for us to start the next chapter. She seemed happy, genuinely so, but looking back now, I can see a flicker of something else in her gaze, a shadow so fleeting I dismissed it as a trick of the light. We packed our lives into boxes, blissfully unaware that we were also packing away the simple, uncomplicated peace we had worked so hard to build. The move to Northwood went smoothly, at least on the surface. Our new house was larger, with a wide porch and a backyard that sloped down to a quiet creek. My work at the new branch was challenging and promising. Alara seemed at ease being back, slipping into the town's rhythm with a familiarity that I, the outsider, envied. But there was a subtle shift in her, something I didn't immediately notice. Whenever we walked through the town's historic main street, I saw her gaze dart around, scanning faces in the crowd. She'd sometimes suggest we take a longer, less direct route to the grocery store or the post office. When I asked her about it, she'd laugh it off. "I just don't want to get stuck in a 20-minute conversation with my third-grade teacher," she'd say lightly. "I have a different life now, with you. I don't feel like dredging up the past." It made sense, so I didn't give it much thought. I was busy, consumed by my new role. The small inconsistencies were easy to ignore, like tiny cracks in a wall you tell yourself you'll fix later. Everything seemed fine, normal even, until the night of the company's annual welcome gala. It was an elegant event held at a renovated ballroom downtown, all brightly lit chandeliers and servers weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne. I loved taking Alara to these gatherings. She was a natural. She knew how to command attention without trying, how to engage in conversation with effortless grace. She made me proud, but something felt off that night. As soon as we arrived, I noticed 2 of my new team members, Cole and another analyst, looking at her strangely. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that it was just the normal curiosity directed at the new boss's wife. But I soon realized the looks were not random. They would glance at her, then look at each other, trading discreet smirks and whispered comments behind their hands. A sudden wave of irritation washed over me. I was their superior, and seeing them eye my wife like that, like she was a piece of gossip, bothered me deeply. I wasn't the possessive type, but there was an unsettling familiarity in their stares. It wasn't just admiration or curiosity. It was as though they shared a secret about her, as if Alara was more to them than just my wife. I watched as Alara took a flute of champagne and blended into the crowd, a picture of poise. She either didn't notice their stares or was a master at ignoring them. I tried to shake off my unease, chalking it up to the stress of the new job. But as the evening went on, I realized those 2 employees weren't alone. Other guests, people I'd only just met, would look at Alara in the same way. A quiet whisper here, a knowing smile there. It wasn't paranoia. Something was happening. The party carried on, but I couldn't relax. What did those looks mean? Why did nobody look at the other executives' wives like that? I tried convincing myself it was all in my head, that her beauty was simply making an impression, but every time I looked around, I saw more concealed smiles and looks that seemed to say, "Oh, her," not in a friendly way, but as if Alara was someone everyone already knew, and not because she was married to me. That night, back at our new, still unfamiliar home, I was restless. Alara, on the other hand, seemed completely unaffected. "That was a nice party, right?" she said, taking off her diamond earrings and collapsing onto the couch with a contented sigh. I hesitated, watching her. Her face was relaxed, her smile genuine. Was I imagining things? Was I letting my own insecurities create a problem where none existed? The feeling lingered over the next few days, a seed of doubt planted without my permission, slowly taking root in the fertile soil of my mind. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but I couldn't ignore it. Finally, sitting in my office and staring blankly at a quarterly report, I decided I had to know. I needed to uncover what lay behind those looks. I needed to hear from someone else what was going on. That was the moment my life, the life I thought I knew, began to unravel. I've never been a jealous man. I always believed that trust was the foundation of any relationship, the bedrock upon which everything else is built. I prided myself on not being controlling or paranoid, but the uneasy feeling from the party wouldn't go away. It clung to me like the humid summer air, thick and suffocating. The way my own employees looked at Alara, the little snickers, the whispers that couldn't be a coincidence. The following day at work, I tried to stick to my normal routine. I answered emails, reviewed reports, and led a team meeting with a feigned sense of authority. But every coffee break, every quiet moment, brought me back to the same questions. What did those looks mean? Why did my wife seem so familiar to these people she claimed not to have seen in years? After hours of pretending I could just ignore it, I realized I couldn't focus until I had some answers. My eyes scanned the open plan office and settled on Cole. He was one of the men I'd seen whispering at the party. He was a more reserved analyst, someone who seemed less inclined to office politics, someone who might speak honestly if pressed. Under the pretense of a casual chat about a project, I asked Cole into my office and closed the door. I started by discussing deadlines and projections, keeping my tone professional. Then, I leaned back in my chair, folded my arms, and changed the subject. "I want to ask you something, Cole," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Last night at the party, I noticed you and a few others seemed to recognize Alara, and it felt like more than just a simple hello." Cole looked visibly uneasy. He shifted in his chair, his gaze dropping to the floor. "What? No, I'm not sure what you mean, Liam. She's your wife, of course we noticed her." His defensive tone, the immediate denial, only confirmed my suspicions. My heart began to beat a little faster. "Cole, be honest with me. I saw the looks. I'm not angry, I just want to know what's going on." He was silent for a few long seconds, his jaw working as if he was deciding whether to cross a dangerous line. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "Look, boss, I didn't want to be the one to tell you. I really didn't. But since you're asking, your wife, well, she's kind of known around town." A chill rose from the base of my spine and spread through my body. "Known?" I managed to say, my voice quieter than I intended. "Known in what way?" Cole hesitated again, then seemed to decide that ripping off the bandage was the only way. "Years ago, before she left Northwood, Alara and her ex-fiancé, they had let's call it, a very different lifestyle. They were into the swinging scene, parties, casual get-togethers, that kind of thing." I blinked several times, my brain struggling to process the words. Swinging scene? The phrase felt alien, like it belonged in a trashy movie, not in a description of my elegant, sophisticated wife. "Everybody who was around back then sort of knows," Cole continued, his voice low and apologetic. "They were pretty active, if you know what I mean. This was years ago, of course, but, well, people in a town this size remember, Alara was insatiable. That was the word people used." My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. A rush of heat ran through my body, followed by a sudden, bone-deep chill. My mouth went dry. "And why didn't anyone ever tell me?" Cole offered a half-apologetic smile, the kind of look you give someone who has just had their world torn apart. "Because nobody wanted to be that guy. Until last night, it looked like you didn't know, and nobody wants to be the messenger with that kind of news. We all figured it was her place to tell you, not ours." I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady, like I needed to find my balance in a room that was suddenly tilting. I had to get out of there, get some air, try to process what I had just heard. "This was before me," I murmured, more to myself than to Cole. "Yes, Boss. It was way before you, he confirmed gently. But, well, her past is kind of town history, and some people don't forget. I'm not sure how the conversation ended. I think I mumbled a thank you. Everything around me felt distant and muffled, like I was underwater. I walked out of my office, left the building without a word to anyone, got in my car, and just drove. I drove aimlessly through the streets of the town I had just moved to, the town that was supposed to be our fresh start. Alara had never mentioned any of this, not a single word. Suddenly, my mind started to piece together a puzzle I hadn't even known existed. Small moments, random comments from the past, expressions I hadn't paid attention to, the way she avoided certain areas of town, how she skillfully changed the subject whenever the conversation veered toward her life before we met, the slight hesitation when she mentioned her ex. It all made a sickening kind of sense now, and it changed everything. I drove around for the entire day. By the time I finally parked in our driveway, the sun was setting, casting long, mournful shadows across the lawn. I still couldn't figure out how to go inside, how to look at her, how to act normal after what I had discovered. My chest felt unbearably heavy, as if I were carrying a burden that was never supposed to be mine. I took a deep breath before opening the front door, the air feeling thick and hard to draw into my lungs. The familiar smell of roasted garlic and herbs hit me, a scent that usually meant comfort and home. Ilara was in the kitchen, a glass of red wine on the counter beside her, humming along to the radio as she chopped vegetables. It looked like just another Tuesday night, a perfect portrait of domestic bliss, but it wasn't. Everything was a lie. I closed the door a bit harder than usual. The sound echoed in the quiet house. Ilara turned to look at me, her face breaking into a warm smile. Hey, honey, you're home. I stood there in the entryway for a few seconds, just observing her. The way her hair was loosely tied up, the focused look on her face as she worked, the effortless grace in her movements. How could she act so normal? How could she be so completely indifferent to the bomb that had just detonated in my life? Did it never occur to you to tell me? The question slipped out before I could stop it, cold and sharp. Her smile faded instantly. Her hand, holding the knife, paused over the cutting board. Tell you what, Liam? I walked closer, dropping my keys on the small table by the door with a loud clatter. I folded my arms across my chest, a defensive posture I didn't even realize I was taking. About your past. About what you and your ex-fiancé used to do in this town. The silence that followed was overwhelming, broken only by the soft music still playing from the radio. Ilara slowly set the knife down on the counter. She rested her hands on the edge of the sink, her knuckles white, as if she needed to support herself for a moment. Her back was to me, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Who told you? She asked quietly. Her voice was forced, strained with a calm that was clearly artificial. There was no real surprise in it. Does it matter? I shot back, my voice rising. What matters is that it feels like everyone in this goddamn town knew. Everyone except me. She turned around slowly and crossed her arms, mirroring my stance. It felt less like a conversation and more like a standoff. I didn't tell you because there was no reason to. That was before you, Liam. It was a different lifetime. It has nothing to do with us. I let out a laugh, but it was a harsh, humorless sound. Before me? You were sleeping with half the town and you thought that was something I never needed to know? Her eyes narrowed. Don't be dramatic. It wasn't half the town, wasn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like everywhere I go, someone is looking at you in a way I should never have to see, thinking about my wife in a way I should never have to imagine. She sighed, a deep, frustrated breath, and shook her head. This doesn't change anything between us. I am the same person you met. I am the same woman you married 2 years ago. I ran my hands over my face, the frustration boiling inside me. You don't get it, do you? It's not just about what you did. It's the lie. It's the fact that everyone else was in on the secret except for me. I walked around this city with you, holding your hand, thinking our marriage was this solid, perfect thing, while people stared at me like I was a fool, like I was the last person to get the joke. Her eyes flashed with anger now. And what exactly did you want? For me to introduce myself on our first date by saying, "Hi, I'm Ilara, and by the way, I used to have a wilder life than you could possibly imagine"? It's not about a wild life, Ilara. I felt my control slipping. You and your ex had a lifestyle, a whole identity, that is the complete opposite of what we have. It's a fundamental part of who you were. I had the right to know who I was marrying. And what would you have done if you'd known? She asked, her question quick and challenging, like a dagger. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. What would I have done? Would I have walked away from this brilliant, captivating woman because of something she did years before she ever met me? She saw my hesitation, and her expression hardened. Exactly, she said, her voice flat. You would have walked away. You would have judged me and you would have left. That's why I didn't tell you. Because I knew it meant nothing to the person I am now, but it would have meant everything to you then. The silence between us was so thick it felt suffocating. Ilara wasn't apologizing. She wasn't crying or begging for forgiveness. She just stood there, unflinching, gazing at me as if whatever happened next was entirely in my hands. And maybe it was. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't bring myself to lie next to her, to feel the warmth of her body and pretend that everything was the same. I stayed on the couch in the living room, staring at the unfamiliar patterns the moonlight made on the ceiling. It was 3 a.m., and the house was silent. I assumed Ilara was in the bedroom, probably sleeping peacefully, showing no sign of regret or remorse. That was what bothered me most, the fact that to her, it seemed to be a non-issue. It was just a distant memory, something irrelevant to our life now. But to me, it felt like the ground had opened up beneath my feet. It felt like something essential in our relationship, something I had believed to be unbreakable, had been ripped away without warning. I had always believed I knew my wife. I knew her habits, her tastes, her quirks. I knew she liked her coffee black, with a single dash of cinnamon. I knew she always slept on her left side, that she had an irrational fear of thunderstorms, and that she hated leaving the bed unmade in the morning. I thought I knew every detail about the woman I loved. But now, sitting in the darkness of our new home, I felt like I'd never known her at all. That thought haunted me. Who was Ilara? Was she the woman who curated art books and designed beautiful spaces? Or was she the woman my colleague had described with a smirk? Could she be both? And if she could, who was I married to? She left for work the next morning without much discussion. There was no big, tearful scene, just a brief, assessing look, a slight nod, as if she was giving me the space she thought I needed to process everything. But time did nothing to help. In fact, the longer I thought about it, the more I sank into the labyrinth of my own mind, each thought leading to another, darker corridor. As the day dragged on, I noticed something deeply unsettling about my own psychology. Just 2 days ago, I had still loved Ilara with my entire being. I still wanted her, still saw her as the woman I had chosen for life. If I had never learned any of this, if Cole had kept his mouth shut, I would have kept on loving her exactly the same way. Our life would have continued on its happy, predictable trajectory. But now that I knew, everything felt different, tainted. The way she would move through the house, the way she might touch my arm, the sound of her voice on the phone, none of it had actually changed, yet in my mind, it felt like it had. It made no sense. It was irrational, a cognitive dissonance I couldn't resolve, but it was real. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. I repeated the facts like a mantra. She never cheated on me. She hasn't done anything like that since we've been together. This was all in the past. But the problem wasn't a logical one. It was emotional. The core issue was the sense that I had been living a lie. If she could hide something this monumental, this definitive about her past for 2 years, what else was she hiding? What other parts of herself had she kept locked away from me? Then came the question I dreaded most, the one that tormented me in the lonely silence of the house. If I had never found out, would I still love her the same way? The answer was an immediate, resounding yes. And that was the cruelest part of it all. My happiness had been contingent on my ignorance. The truth hadn't set me free, it had imprisoned me. That night, I didn't wait for her to come home. I packed a small overnight bag, my hands moving mechanically. I needed space. I needed air. I drove out of our driveway, feeling suffocated by the weight of a truth I never asked for. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there. The bar was nearly empty, a dimly lit place on the edge of town with sticky floors and the lingering smell of stale beer. It was the kind of place people went to be alone together. A few solitary figures were scattered at tables, lost in their own silent troubles. I sat at the bar and ordered a whiskey, neat. I turned the glass in my fingers, watching the amber liquid swirl under the dim light. I wasn't the type to drink like this, to seek solace at the bottom of a glass, but that night I needed something to dull the sharp edges of my thoughts. 1 whiskey became 2, then 3, but no amount of alcohol could erase the questions churning in my head. Ilara's words from our fight echoed in my mind. I am the same person you met. But was she really? Or had I only ever seen in her what I wanted to see? Had I constructed a version of her in my mind that fit my ideal, and simply ignored the parts that didn't? I wondered again, if I'd never found out, would things still be fine? We'd be at home right now, probably curled up on the couch watching a movie. We'd be planning our future, maybe even talking about having children soon. But now, every potential future felt tainted by this revelation from the past. What hurt the most, I realized as I stared at my own tired reflection in the mirror behind the bar, was that Ilara didn't seem regretful, not for what she'd done, but for not telling me. She wasn't trying to make things easier or soften the blow. She just accepted her past as an unchangeable fact, an old chapter she had closed. Maybe that was what really wounded me. Her pragmatism felt like indifference. It felt like my pain didn't matter as much as her principle. A woman approached the bar and ordered a drink next to me. She had blonde hair, a black leather jacket, and bright red nails that tapped impatiently on the worn wooden surface. She saw me looking and offered a small, knowing smile. Rough night? I gave a bitter laugh. Something like that. She tilted her head, studying me with perceptive eyes. You look like someone trying to make a big decision. I finished my drink in one swallow, the burn searing its way down my throat. And if you're right, she shrugged, taking a sip of her own drink. Then I'd say if you're thinking about it this hard, you already know the answer. You're just trying to find a way to live with it. I stared at my reflection again. A tired face, dark circles under my eyes, a lost expression I didn't recognize. She was right. In a strange, simple way, she was absolutely right. I already knew the answer. My love for Alara hadn't vanished. It was still there, a stubborn, aching presence in my chest. That was the problem. I couldn't just turn it off. The real issue, the real poison, was the city itself. It was the stories hanging over us like a ghost. The looks from Cole, the whispers at the party, the memories of things I hadn't lived but that seemed to haunt every corner of this town. What if the problem wasn't Alara, but this place? I left some money on the counter and walked out without another word. The cool night air felt good on my face. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of clarity cut through the fog of anger and betrayal. I knew what I loved, and I was starting to understand what I couldn't live with. The house was dark when I got back, except for a small lamp casting a soft, lonely glow in the living room. Alara was on the couch, legs crossed, holding a cup of tea. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mixture of expectation and exhaustion. I figured you'd been drinking, she said softly. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. I didn't reply right away. I took off my coat, tossed it on a chair, and just looked at her. The woman I loved. The woman who, until just days ago, had been everything to me. I realized the truth in that moment. It wasn't Alara who had changed. It was me. My perception of her, of us, had been shattered, and I could never piece it back together in the same way again. Not here. No matter how much I tried to rationalize, to tell myself the past doesn't dictate the present, something inside me had broken under the weight of those knowing stares and whispered secrets. I can't stay here anymore, I finally said, my voice low, almost a whisper. Alara didn't look surprised. She closed her eyes briefly, a flicker of pain crossing her face before she composed herself. It was as if she'd been prepared for this outcome. I figured you'd say that. My chest tightened. A desperate part of me wanted her to fight, to beg me to stay, to say something, anything that could make it all go back to the way it was. But Alara wasn't that kind of woman, and our situation was past that point. She just sipped her tea, set the cup down on the coaster beside her, and looked at me with a sad, steady gaze. I don't regret my past, Liam, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. It led me to who I am now. If you can't live with it, then you should go. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I wish I could, I said, the words heavy with a meaning she immediately understood. I wished I could just live with it, but I couldn't. She gave me a sad, faint smile. I know. I walked over to the suitcase I'd left packed in the hallway. I didn't know where I would go or what I would do, but I knew I couldn't stay there, in that house, in that town. Before leaving, I turned and looked at Alara one last time. In that quiet, heartbreaking moment, I realized with absolute certainty that I still loved her. But sometimes, love isn't enough to conquer the ghosts of a place. I shut the door behind me, the click of the latch echoing like a final judgment. I was leaving not just a house, but a part of who I used to be. The man who believed in perfect pictures and uncomplicated love was gone, but as I stood on the porch, my plan to drive away faltered. The clarity I'd felt at the bar returned. Leaving her wasn't the answer. Leaving this place was. I turned around, opened the door again, and found her standing right where I'd left her, tears silently streaming down her face. She looked up, startled. I love you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I never stopped loving you. She lowered her eyes for a moment, but didn't smile. But, I swallowed hard, taking a step toward her. I can't live here. I can't walk around this town without feeling like I'm constantly facing your past. I can't see the whispers in every glance. She gave a small nod, as if she knew this was inevitable. I know. I took another step forward and reached for her hand, my fingers closing around hers. I don't want to lose you, Alara. But I need to leave this place. And I'd like you to come with me. She finally looked directly at me, and there was something new in her gaze. A quiet, profound relief, like she'd been waiting for a way out, too. Then let's go. I blinked, taken aback by how quickly, how simply she answered. You really want to? She offered a faint, watery smile. I asked HR for a transfer 2 days ago. The company has an office in Portland. They agreed yesterday. Her words hit me like a wave of warmth, chasing away the chill that had settled in my heart. She hadn't been indifferent. She had been fighting for us in her own quiet, pragmatic way. So, I started, not knowing what to say. She cut me off, her grip on my hand tightening. So we'll start over. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere where the only history that matters is the one we make together. 6 weeks later, we arrived in a new city, a place where the air smelled of rain and pine, a place where nobody knew Alara's name, where no one looked at me like they knew something I didn't. The past still existed, a scar we both knew was there, but it didn't have to be an open wound, because there, in that new place, surrounded by strangers who saw us only as Liam and Alara, the only past that mattered was the one we were just beginning to create.